Hi there, welcome to my YouTube tutorials, games to play during piano lessons. This is game number 3 and it's called A Dragging Cheetah Hunts to Eat a Snail That Runs. As you can already suspect from this weird title, this game has to do with practicing and teaching tempos, different tempos to your students, and also their changes. This piano game can also be adapted into a classroom for music classes, for music lessons. So at the end of the video, I'll give examples on how to do this transformation. So now let's get started. What is a tempo? Explain shortly, simply, but concisely. A tempo is a speed with which we play a music piece. Before giving examples, and I also would like to mention I don't use heavy scientific terms such as beats per minute or the use of metronome. I'll explain a little later why. And before giving them examples of tempos in music, ask your students to give you examples of the different speeds, the different tempos that they observe in their everyday life. They will usually mention a car that is running very fast, them running in a game, their grandpa with a walker or a mixer in the kitchen. And then I give them only 3 to 4 different tempos that have distinctive differences in between them. You don't need to give a lot of information from the beginning, just some basic tempos so that they get the difference and they get to know too when looking at the music score, not just looking at the time signature, but also the tempo, the general speed and the character of the piece. So I use lento or largo, which in general means slowly. Then the second tempo I use is andante, in a walking pace. Third tempo, allegro, fast. And fourth tempo, presto, very fast. I translate those words. I also explain to them that it's a tradition that the music terms are written in Italian. And I like to give this translation because it also gives away the character of the tempo, because tempo is not just a number. That's why I don't use the metronome or beats per minute terms. Like, for example, let's take the tempo andante. Comes from the word andare, which means to walk. So it's going to have a walking pace. Or presto, which literally means very fast. So you're going to play very fast. Or another tempo, energico, with energy. So this tempo will definitely not be a slow tempo. Now, the second part of the game is to give the changes of the tempos, accelerando and ritardando, or ritenuto. Although ritardando and ritenuto have some basic difference in between them. I'll explain later. Again, before giving explanation for these changes, I ask them to give me examples of everyday life. Some of them would be like their dad hitting the brakes on a red light that he saw all of a sudden because he was distracted, or them seeing the school bus coming from afar and not realizing that they're about to miss it, so they have to start running. They're making accelerando to catch it, and others. And now, what is accelerando? It's to speed up from a slow or slower tempo speed to gradually make it faster and faster, to accelerate. And ritardando, the exact opposite, from a faster or fast tempo, gradually making it slower and slower. Now, ritenuto is usually, it's a more free slowing down of the tempo, and it's usually in the last bar or 2 bars of a music piece. And actually your students will use ritenuto more often, and they'll see it in their music scores rather than ritardando. But for the sake of the game, I prefer to use those terms, accelerando and ritardando, because their changes are gradual. So let's move on to the piano. I am choosing to play, I will play I will show those tempos and their changes in two different ways. Firstly, I will use a harmonic scale going up and down, and then I will use the first phrase of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Again, at the end of the video description, I will give examples of music pieces, of known music pieces that have this kind of tempos, and also accelerando, and also an adaptation for music lessons. Let's get started. So now let's play the harmonic A minor scale, giving those 4 different tempos, and at the end adding accelerando and then ritardando. Let's start lento or largo. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now andante. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now allegro. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now presto. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now the first phrase of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Lento or largo? 1, 2, 1, 2. Andante. 1, 2, 1, 2. And now allegro. 1, 2, 1, 2. And now presto. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now making accelerando. I'm starting in a slower tempo, maybe andante, let's say. 1, 2, 1, 2. And now ritardando, starting from a faster tempo, maybe allegro. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now, after you've shown them those tempos and their changes, you can ask your students to guess the tempos that you're playing by giving examples with music pieces. Or ask your student exchange positions. You become the student that has to guess, and they become the teacher that are showing the examples with a plain C major scale. Even one hand will do. Ask them to play it not in a row, in a different ways, different tempos, the scale, and that you, as a teacher that has become the student, has to guess what kind of tempo they're using, or if they're using accelerando or ritardando. Now, some typical music pieces that you can play, they should already know by then the basic differences on what is that a piece is maybe allegro or presto. Okay, if they don't get that difference, it's okay, but they will get the difference of an allegro piece or a lento piece or an andante. Now, a very typical example of accelerando is with Edward Grieg's in the Hall of the Mountain King. You can ask them at what tempo does this start. And what happens little by little. accelerando throughout the whole piece. I just did it a little earlier for the sake of this example. Another piece that you can play that's very typical with its tempo is obviously allegro. Clowns by Kabalevsky. And at the end, again, one accelerando that you can make or not make, that depends on you. You can make also the ritardando. Or the Danube valse. They don't need to guess exactly the tempo, neither you have to give them exactly what Strauss has written for this piece, but it's important for them to be able to recognize that this is not an allegro tempo, but it's also not a largo tempo. Another piece very typical that they know of, it's quite fast. They should be able already to differentiate from allegro and say that this is presto. And now, how we can adapt this piano game into a music game inside a classroom. Just choose a sentence. Let's say, for example, there's a brown spider on your back. And say it with those different tempos without drawing anything on the board or saying anything to your students. Ask them to guess what it is that you did while changing the pace, the tempos of this sentence. Lento. There's a brown spider on your back. Andante. There's a brown spider on your back. Allegro. There's a brown spider on your back. Presto. There's a brown spider on your back. Now making accelerando. There's a brown spider on your back. Ritardando. There's a brown spider on your back. It actually also changes the intonation and the picture that you're imagining while making an accelerando or ritardando. They will explain in their own words what that is, and that's totally okay. That is what we want from them, for them to critically think. And then you can draw it on the board and give it names. Largo or lento, andante, allegro, presto, accelerando, ritardando. Then you can ask them to come up with their own sentence and stand up and say it either in this order, or you just show on the board, I want you to say this sentence that you chose in tempo allegro, and then I want you to start andante and making accelerando. Then you can divide them into two opposing teams and gathering points, and you are saying other kinds of sentences or that sentence that you used in different tempos or their changes, and they have to guess exactly what it is you're doing. You choose just one member of each team to answer, and then if they get it or not, you are gathering the points. You can also do this exchange of position, student becoming the teacher and the teacher becoming the student that has to guess, also with your student in your piano lessons. Now, some teaching tips. It's very important to do this exchange of roles between your students, because that way the student understands the responsibility that he has to give examples in a very precise way, so that the teacher, who now becomes the student, has to guess what it is they're doing. So they like this, firstly, this freedom that you give them, and this responsibility that you're respecting them, that they will go through this. And the next thing is also for the scoring part. Keep score, because then they will have a measurable result of how many times they guessed or how many times they made a mistake, which is a point for the teacher then, or they didn't guess, which is again a point for you as a teacher. Don't give away points for free. They will know it and they won't appreciate it. And even if they lose, they don't gather that many points, they will be eager to play again, especially in a music class, because they want the win. They don't understand that while they are playing, they're learning, but they want the win. it's a win-win situation also for you as a teacher because they're learning. Have fun, play fair, don't give away points for free, and I'll see you on my next piano games video.